So this lesson I'm going to show you some 2D applique. So this is felt, which is quite good to use. If you haven't got felt, you can use denim, you can even use just some basic cloth that might have even come from something like a tea towel. Felt, as we talked about in the lesson, is quite good because when you cut the edge of it, because it's a bonded fabric, it doesn't fray. You still get the fibres where it's been bonded together, but it won't fray, and it's quite, you don't need to put a seam on it. So if I wanted to create some white eyes, I could fold it in half, fold my fabric in half. I could make myself a little circular template first so that I've got the actual size. If you haven't got a compass, you could draw around something like a glue stick. Let's grab a glue stick. This isn't a glue stick, but it'll do. So something like this, the lid of something, you could use that and draw around that with your pencil. If you're working on black, you could use chalk, or it actually, the graphite actually shows up alright normally. It probably won't on the camera, but you can normally see the line that you've created. So once you've drawn your circle, so that they're both the same size, if you fold your fabric, you make sure you've allowed enough to be able to do this. Fold your fabric and then cut them both out at the same time. Now you could use a pin to hold that if you wanted to, in the middle, like that. So you use a pin, or you can just not use a pin, but let me show you with a pin, because if you've got a pin you could use it. But these are just paper scissors, and as you can see, felt does cut fine with paper scissors. It's obviously a bit quicker and easier if you have got fabric scissors. But if you I've cut that, and I've got two eyes that are the same size. So I will now want to make some black for the centre of the eyes. I'm going to do it the same way. Okay, so there's my eyes, like that. Right, so this time I'm just going to tie a knot at one end, and I'll show you the difference, what it looks like. You don't get as thick a line to border, but some of you might prefer this, so let's just show you both ways. So you see how I've created my loop, and then I'm putting the loop through my finger on the other hand, and using my finger and thumb as a pincer to grab hold of that end and keep rotating it and pulling it through the loop that I made. Then I'm going to pull my knot like that, so I've got a reasonable size knot. So come through the back of the fabric first, so your knot's at the back, like that. Now you're not going to be able to see very well what I'm doing here because I'm working on black to start off with. So I'm just going to quickly do some stitches to hold that in place, and then I'll show you a little bit more detail on the white. Another stitch you can use for stuff like this is whip stitch, where you go to the edge, you catch a bit of the white and you catch the black as well. Pull it through, catch a bit of the white, catch the black, pull it through to the front, catch a bit of the white, catch the black, pull it through to the front. I'm going to sew all these three pieces on at the same time. I'm going to start from the back of my work, so my needle comes through the middle of the fabric, and it's going to come through the black first. So I've done that a couple of times. Now I'm going to show you how I bordered this off with the back stitch. Now, if you practiced well last lesson, you probably don't even really need me to show you this, but I will show you just in case. So it's two pieces of fabric here, so I probably can just rotate it. Okay, so remember back stitch, your needle comes back into the last stitch and then rotates forward ahead of the stitch that's just come out. So I'm going to come about here. Now don't just go with the first place that your needle comes out. If it doesn't look right, pull the needle out and reposition yourself until you're happy with it. So if you have big stitches around the outside, you're going to have a jagged line, and you don't want that. So make sure your stitches aren't too long if you're doing back stitch, or even if you're doing whip stitch, which I'll show you in a minute. So when you're happy with where the needle's coming out, then go for it and pull it through. Back into where the last stitch was, rotate it forward when you're happy with it. Pull it through like that. Back into the last stitch, rotate it forward to where it needs to come out. Pull it through. Like that. Okay, so that was back stitch like we did last lesson when you practiced just on the scrap piece of fabric, on a single piece of fabric, rather than this is applique and we're layering up different pieces of fabric to make a pattern. Now if you decide, oh, I don't really like the look of that, you might want to go for something like whip stitch instead. So whip stitch is when you grab a little bit of the back fabric, you rotate the needle and you come through the front. You catch a little bit of the back fabric, try and get your stitches the same distance apart from one another. You grab a little bit of the back fabric and then the white fabric at the front, bit of the back. My thread's getting quite short, so I'm going to remind you how to thread off at the back. So when your thread is about a couple of lengths of the needle, you need to tie off. If you leave it any shorter than that, you don't have enough thread to be able to tie off, and this is how you tie off. Catch a little bit of fabric at the back or the last stitch. Before the loop disappears, put the needle through the loop, pull it into a knot like that. So I'll just repeat that. Before the loop disappears, put the needle through, pull it into a knot, and then just cut that off because it's too short to do anything with now. Okay, so that is 2D applique. So now I'll show you 3D applique. So 3D applique is when you have something coming from the back of the fabric. So you would cut a hole and something would protrude from the back, or something would just be revealed from the back. So the way that I created these eyes was with 2D applique, but I could, if I wanted to, cut a hole in the front of the fabric and reveal a colour behind and sew that into place. Or I could cut in a mouth and I can have something like a tongue coming out or some teeth. So I'm going to show you how you can cut that and make it into a mouth. So if I fold it down the middle, and then I'll use the paper scissors just to show you that it cuts okay with double layer. Cut my curve like that. So I've got my opening of my mouth. Okay, you can see that. Now I might want to make it a little bit more open, so I'm going to trim off a little bit from the front of that. Not too much. Take a little bit at a time. If you take too much, you obviously can't put it back again, so do a little bit at a time. So there's my mouth, and I'm now going to use a bit of black fabric. I know it's not particularly the best colour for a tongue, but it doesn't matter, I'm just practicing. So work out the width that it needs to be. Cut that down. I actually think these fabric scissors are blunter than the paper scissors. Now, because I want to create a curved tongue, I'm going to fold in half like that, and I'm going to create my curve like that. So there's my tongue, and then I might pop it in like that, and then I've got a tongue sticking out like that. And I could also put some teeth in there as well, so I might be able to get them out of here, save wasting the rest of this. So I cut the length like that. I'm going to keep this length here together rather than cut individual teeth, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out some just like really thin strips to make my teeth like this. Now the reason I'm doing this is to make it easier to join the teeth afterwards. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Let's just add the teeth a little bit. They're not the best teeth in the world, but they will do. Right, because now I've got a whole length along there, it's going to make it easier to sew it to the back of here rather than individual teeth. So if you've got a pin, you might want to hold it into place first, like that. If you've not got a pin, don't worry too much, just use your fingers to hold it in place. So I'm going to come into the back of the bottom of the mouth first, like that. And I'm going to use my whip stitch like I used on the outside here to hold this into place. So into a bit of the black and into the bottom of the mouth, like that. when you're at the back of the work, it doesn't have to be quite as neat as you worked on the front, but you do need to make sure you don't do massive big stitches, otherwise your thing's not going to last 5 minutes. And even though we're practicing, we want to make sure that we get as good as possible at this before we start making the actual thing. So you see I've sewn that on quite quickly. I'm just going to remind you how to tie off again. Before that loop disappears, put the needle through the loop, pull it into a knot like that. Now I want to make sure these teeth are held in place. Rotate the needle so that I come forward of the last stitch about the same distance, 5mm, like that. Back into the last stitch, rotate it. I obviously need new glasses because that isn't the best stitching in the world, is it? Okay, back into the last stitch, through into the white of the fabric and back out to the front, like that. That's terrible stitching, but it's probably going to make you feel better about yours, so I'm going to go with it. I'm under pressure, you see, with the video. Right, into the last stitch, rotate it. Into the last stitch. And tie off at the back, like that. Okay, so I'm just going to catch a little bit of that. Go through the loop again and cut it off. You can repeat that if you want, but as is a sample, I'm just going to do it once. If it was on my actual thing, I would certainly do a double knot just to make sure that it stayed there. So you can see now that I've got some crazy teeth and a tongue sticking out. I'd have a go at making something that goes into the mouth as well, some kind of piece of food or something like that might be quite fun. Okay, so have fun with it, enjoy it, and I look forward to seeing what you get up to.